Well, yeah, I mean, they are enamored with it, but it gets worse. NASA's lead scientist, you probably covered this on your program, James Hansen, has now endorsed a book which calls for, quote, ridding the world of industrial civilization. And I'm not making this up. And that's why at Climate Depot I put, is it time for medicine for James Hansen?
But that's what they all say. That's what Pachari says. It's what Maury Strong say. That's almost a complete, I read his quote in his book. That is almost word for word what Maury Strong says.
Yeah, and not only that, but even Pachari, you mentioned, he's at the point now where they're talking about a level of global governance where you're not going to be able to have ice water in restaurants. I mean, you have the head of the UN chief writing smutty novels at the same time telling the Western world that they can't have ice water in restaurants because we have to save the planet. Meanwhile, he's telling the news services that he lives at 30,000 feet. He has a car and driver chauffeuring him the one mile or so.
Stay there, Mark. Stay there, Mark. Folks, this is the ultimate green tyranny. The ultimate tyranny. It's taken over your towns and cities. Kick these crooks out. They're parasites. ClimateDepot.com. Every move they make, every word they say, we're watching them and proving their fraud. Marc Morano, ClimateDepot.com is our guest. We're going to open the phones up for our guest, your questions, one of the leading experts on these criminals and how to fight them. 1-800-259-9231. Mark, this is a short segment, so I want you to be able to run through all the news scandals. Then let's get into the fact that it's not just a chicken with their head cut off. I guess it's partially cut off. I mean, $2.6 billion in taxes in 3 years in Austin. They're not stopping. They're just going around the Senate. They're using the EPA. They're not stopping.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And that's, and perhaps I am too much of a cheerleader for the death of this. I'm actually just about to post at Climate Depot a shot of a casket with roses being thrown on. The problem is you're making a very good point. Liberalism doesn't die when you chop its head off. It's going to come back. It's like a hydra. All these multiple heads and limbs just keep coming back. But I think what's going to happen is the global warming movement as we know it is done. I actually did a piece about 2 or 3 weeks ago now about time for the next eco-scare. They're already test marketing the next eco-scares. The UN chief himself, when he's not writing smut, is actually saying that there's a larger problem than global warming, and that's sustainable development. Al Gore's producer, Laurie David, is worried about plastic waste. The UK Green Party is out worried about the whole new eco thing about loss of oxygen. That man-made emissions are creating an oxygen crisis. And they're saying it's more alarming than global warming. We have people worried about nitrous oxide, otherwise known as laughing gas, which is again used in fertilizing, which is part of our agricultural production. It's all based on, all these new eco-scares are based on limiting human freedom, limiting human development, and controlling population and giving government more power in order to, quote, save us. So I think global warming may be damaged beyond repair in terms of an issue to sell. And we have Democratic Agricultural Chairman Peterson now came out and admitted that he will now vote no on the climate bill if it comes back up because he went back home and was laughed at and ridiculed and mocked. So it's become politically untenable. But you're right. There's so many regulations in place that it has to be fought. But I think the danger is going to be the next eco-scare when it comes out. And actually, I think
wait a minute, Mark. A year ago,
the EU was actually talking about other scares and how we have to move from global warming, and this wasn't right. But there's going to be something down the road. But there's going to be a leftover. I think we can actually defeat this now. It is mortally wounded, if not dead.
Well, I agree with you if we press the issue. But there was a New York Times article almost a year ago, back in February of 2009. And it talked about the PR firms with the White House already saying we've got to move away from saying warming to change. Any change is abnormal, basically the seasons, and that the ocean is turning to acid, and the key term, our deteriorating atmosphere. And so they already were starting to hedge their bet and move to a new fraud a year ago.
And they were, and and they have been. In fact, you have UN scientists, Professor Latif, raising the specter of possible global cooling for decades. You have peer-reviewed studies saying no warming for 3 decades. A new peer-reviewed study came out in December last year, warning of 50 years of global cooling. What they've found, it's just untenable to say CO2 drives temperature, period. There's hundreds, thousands of factors influencing the global climate. CO2 is but a trace essential gas in the atmosphere. It could never have had the properties or abilities that they claimed it did. And now even the warmest are admitting this. A new study by one of the lead UN authors, Susan Solomon, is showing that water vapor may have actually suppressed temperatures over the last decade. They're all scratching their heads. The models didn't predict it. They never foresaw this. Yet Susan Solomon is out there telling people that we need to think of CO2, something we exhale from our mouth, akin to nuclear waste. Imagine, when kids used to go to school, they learned that CO2 was vital in photosynthesis, that it's a trace essential gas, and that it greens the planet Earth. Now they're being told it's nuclear waste, and that is a perversion of science. Same thing's happening in Africa, by the way. There's multiple African environmental activists blaming young girls turning to prostitution on man-made global warming. So imagine you have a generation of Africans being raised that anything bad that happens to them, drought, floods, hurricanes, your daughter becomes a hooker, is because of the West wealth and their emissions.
I saw that, Mark.
Science, Alex, and they're being exposed right now.
But it's even worse than that. First, it was Danny Glover saying Haiti happened because of global warming. Then last week, I saw the UN saying it.
Yeah, I mean, and they've tried to do it. That's why the leading scientists are now calling it climate astrology. Whether the ice caps warm, melt, expand, freeze, whether you have floods, droughts, hurricanes, whether you have record cold, blizzards, everything's consistent with global warming. You can't falsify the theory. Hence, it's become no more scientific than your daily horoscope in the newspaper. It is a joke. It is a laughingstock. At my website today, I have this Indian magazine, the headline, "We've been had. Global warming, the, quote, hottest hoax in the world, a pack of lies."
Stay there. Stay there. We're going to come right back, long segment, to talk about how we fight this, because they're not going away. They're not backing off. Marc Morano, ClimateDepot.com. I'm Alex Jones.
We're on the